Ted needs no introduction, but I'm going to give a brief bio, hopefully brief and accurate. Ted is the founder and chairman, CEO, and majority shareholder of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, which owns the Washington Wizards, Capitals, Mystics, Valor, Baltimore Brigade, the over-the-top sports network, the newly named Capital One Arena, and co-owner of a global esports franchise. Ted also is a co-founder and partner in Revolution Growth, a billion-dollar venture firm which provides speed-up capital to companies outside of Silicon Valley. Ted is also a nationally known and recognized entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist, and award-winning filmmaker. Ted serves on a number of boards, including Groupon and American Express, and was the former vice chair and president of AOL. Ted grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, and Brooklyn, New York. He's the son of a Greek immigrant. His father was a waiter. His mother was a temporary secretary. He was the first in his family to go to college and graduated from nearby Georgetown University. And so I'd like to start there with how you selected Georgetown University, or how Georgetown University selected you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, honor to be here, and I love speaking to young people. And Bobby listed a whole bunch of teams. I'm pleased to say Bobby's a season ticket holder to every one of those. Probably goes to more games than I do. So my mom and dad didn't go to college. My dad didn't really finish high school. And all the people that I grew up with, they didn't have careers, they had jobs. And so the peer group around me was hardworking, very ethnic, and your aspiration, American dream when you're an immigrant son, was you would do better than your parents did. That was really the stated goal. And we didn't have very much money, and so I was always hustling to make some money over the summer. And one summer I decided I would mow lawns. That seemed like a simple thing to do. And I went to a library and I bought a book on how to mow lawns. Sounds funny, no internet, no iPhones. And in the book, black and white, they had different cuts, the way you could mow lawns. And I went knocking on doors, and I said, I'm a student in high school, I need to make some money, I can mow your lawn, and what cut would you like? And there was a guy named Jim Shannon, and Jim said he liked that, and he said, that one, the Wembley cut. And so I mowed his lawn during the summer, and I figured if I was going to mow lawns, I'd be the best lawn mower there could be. And I honestly would lay down after I mowed just to see what the cut was like. And on occasion, I'd see Mr. Shannon looking out the window. And at the end of the summer, he said, what are you thinking about college? And I honestly didn't have an answer for him. And he said, I went to Georgetown. You should consider going to Georgetown. And I never heard of Georgetown, had never been to Washington, D.C. He delivered to my house a little brochure with a picture of the campus, and I filled out this little form, put a stamp on it. And long story short, he helped me to get into Georgetown. And the first time I'd ever been in Washington, the first time I ever saw Georgetown University was the day I enrolled. And it totally changed my life. Last night I was at an event with the president of Georgetown. He was the ADL Man of the Year, and I introduced him. I've been on the board forever. And Mr. Shannon recently passed away. I made a donation in his name, the first donation to the school. And it's a good life lesson. I laid down on the grass and bought a book to be the best lawnmower I could at 16 years old, and it changed my life. And so it's a life lesson. Sometimes little things done the right way have this enormous unintended positive consequence. And I thank Mr. Shannon like every day, because I have no idea how my life would have turned out if he hadn't said, Georgetown could use a boy like you, Ted.
That's great. Well, also, if you could talk a little bit about your college experience and looking back today, how you feel that may have shaped some of your business career.
Because I was not wealthy as a kid, going to college was a privilege, and my parents drilled into me, take advantage of the opportunity. And when I went to Georgetown, I had a lot of friends who went to private schools, and they were privileged. And again, I realized that hard work, curiosity, putting in the effort could differentiate you. And it was amazing to me how a lot of these kids who went to the best schools and had better SAT scores than me and were taller, thinner, and handsome, and had cars and the like, all of a sudden on this playing field, that through effort and grit and determination, that I could beat them. And it was like a meritocracy. That was the great thing about school. And so I inhaled everything that I could about the university experience. I worked on campus, I worked on the Hill, interned for my congressman, I worked in a shoe store, I went to every lecture, guest lecturer who came on campus. I did everything I could to get my money's worth. It always amazes me when you hear, I sleep late, I miss class, I'm online on Facebook, I'm a slacker. It's like, man, it's like $60,000 a year. This is the best time of your life. Take advantage of it. Connect the dots of all of those experiences. And when I was on campus, at Georgetown, you're given a mentor. And my mentor was a 75-year-old Jesuit priest, Dr. Father Durkin, who, after Jim Shannon, became the most influential man in my life, obviously short of my dad. And he was a prolific author. I think he died when he was 101 years old. He wrote 92 books. Yeah, Father Joseph Durkin, a legend at the school. He was this little nerdy guy, and he was given to me, I think because I was curious, and we had to do a thesis, a junior thesis, and you prepare for it, that integrated multiple subjects. And I was not procrastinating, but because I was working on the Hill and working in the shoe store, and I started my first business. It was a snow cone vending business, summer of 1976, the bicentennial, be a patriot, eat a snow cone. And so I fell behind, and he said, what are you going to do your senior thesis on? And I went to the library, and I went in search for the thinnest book I could find in the library. That was my goal. And I found the thinnest book, and it was Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I encourage you to read Old Man in the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. And the first chapter's one page. The sun was up, the sky was blue. I said, this is my kind of book. And it honestly is the thinnest book that they had. And I read the book, and I enjoyed it. And Father Durkin said, what's it about? And I told him, and he said, I'm really disappointed in you. That's a very superficial view. I want you to read it again. There's a lot of metaphor in here. There's a lot of allegory, there's a lot of faith-based writing and thinking. Read it again, be critical. And so I did, and we had a meaningful conversation, and I said, he is a great writer. I get it. And I said, I'll do something on Hemingway. And I went back to the library, got his next book, and it was called Across the River and Into the Trees, and that book was this big, with like 100-page paragraphs, and totally different book. And I started reading his books, and I had this idea. Hemingway had written Old Man and the Sea in 1951. A couple of years later, he took his own life. Early in his career, he was a journalist, and my idea was that Hemingway had written Old Man and the Sea early in his career, and then needed the money, and so kind of took it out of a drawer and freshened it up. And Father Durkin said, now that's critical thinking. How will you prove it? And I had no idea. And he said, you should use a computer. It was 1976. There was one computer on the entire campus at Georgetown University with less computing power than an iPad. And it was in the registrar's office. It's probably still there as an IBM 370 punch card keyboard. And Father Durkin found a young woman who was a linguistics major, and then the two people on campus that could program in Fortran, I think was the language. And we came up, I would go to the library where the registrar's office was, and I had to type in the first 5,000 words of a book written, an article written in the 40s and the 50s and throughout his career, and then Old Man and the Sea as a control. And we wrote the first algorithm. Sergey Brin's family is from University of Maryland. They wrote the best algorithm, back rub. But we created an algorithm that had 17 measures, words per sentences, sentences per paragraph, active pronoun usage, and we said, here's all his work, here's the control, tell us objectively when Old Man and the Sea was written, and the computer said 1938. And it was stunning that a computer and software and kind of integrating a lot of disciplines. And to be honest, I was introduced to computers. It won like a best paper. It got published. It showed creativity, and that a liberal arts background would be helpful. And I remember Father Durkin saying, this is the first time in my lifetime where liberal arts and technology have come together. 1976. If you read Walter Isaacson's book on Apple Computer and Steve Jobs, Apple became the world's most valuable company, $500 billion market cap, and they asked Steve, why is Apple so valuable? And he said, Apple's the only place where liberal arts and technology come together. And so who would have thought a skinny book by a writer named Hemingway and a Jesuit priest would kind of view what the world is today more than 40 years later. And so again, it's just being an entrepreneur and thoughtful and mindful about connecting the dots and using all of the tools available to you on a great campus like University of Maryland.
Well, speaking of entrepreneurship, after you graduated college, you went to work for Wang Laboratories. Several years after, you started your own company. I believe the acronym was LIST, the Leonsis Index of Software Technology. It was sold for, at age 27, you were able to sell the company for $60 million and personally netting $20 million. Shortly thereafter, though, you had a very serious life-altering experience. Please tell us about that.
So we're all programmed, especially in the immigrant experience, to work real hard, get good grades, get a good job, make a lot of money, be successful, full stop. And so I did that. I skipped a grade, I skipped the 8th grade, I went from 7th grade to 9th grade. I started my company when I was 25 with $1 million in venture capital and sold it. And I declared victory. Hollow, empty, but I won that part of the journey. And it feels a little hollow, and this is what I love talking to students about. That is a false chase. That's running on a treadmill and burning off 300 calories to declare that as a victory, but you don't know that until you have your reckoning. When Bobby was introduced, he was introduced as a great entrepreneur and a great businessman and a civic leader, and Bobby's had a reckoning in his life and his family. He lost his sister. We all have reckonings: small, medium, large, extra large. Aspirations not met, financial setbacks, someone breaks your heart, health scare, someone close to you dies. So I got on the wrong airplane, and the airplane developed all sorts of issues, and we were coming in for crash landing. And when you have that clarity and the plane's going down, or you're on an operating table and you don't know if you're going to wake up, you're having your reckoning, you're not sitting around going, gosh, I just bought a brand new BMW. I'm going to miss that car. It's very clarifying on the reckoning. And I was raised Greek Orthodox, and I'm not that spiritual, but I did start to pray. It was very inauthentic, embarrassed to say, so I'm not practicing deeply religious. But at that moment, I was praying, and I started laughing. I remember the woman sitting next to me looking at me horrified, because all I could think of is, you're praying, and God was listening. He or she would say, oh, now you need me. And so I tried to cut a deal. And my deal, my soundbite was, let me through this and I'll leave more than I take. Good soundbite. Like you're pitching a movie, you're pitching Shark Tank, you kind of need your soundbite. That was my soundbite. Let me through this, I'll leave more than I take. And I made it through. And now it was, well, what does that mean? What's the deal? And so the first thing I did was I don't even talk about this much anymore, but I made a list, which was, here's 101 things that I'll do that if I could get through all 101, I don't recommend, I used to sign my book, Make Your List. I don't anymore. I realize it's not as important, but I tried to metric, and here's the 101 things that I'll do that I have the second shot at life that will build a body of work where I'll play offense rather than defense, and I'll be able to say I left more than I took. I'm in 83 of them. I haven't won a championship. It's on the list. It's interesting on the list because I did put on this list, I wrote it in 1982, own a sports team. Fall in love, get married, have kids, have grandchildren, do this via charity, win an Oscar, win an Emmy Award, do this in philanthropy. It was a random list. And one was buy sports teams, win championships. I didn't have the means or the way to do that, but I wrote that down. And here's another good life lesson in the importance of writing things down. When I did fall in love and eventually get married, I shared my list with my wife, and she thought it was stupid, but she thought it was cute but dumb that I had in my back of my closet door my list, and one day I had see a volcano erupt, and CNN is on, and on the big island of Hawaii, the volcano erupted, and I come home that night and I say, pack your bags. So what do you? I said, we're going to Hawaii. I got to get it off my list. I've never been to Hawaii. We'll have a great time. And what if there's not another active volcano in our lifetime? We got to go to Hawaii and see that. And we did. We had a fantastic time. Probably our daughter was conceived there. And I eventually, on my list was create the world's biggest media company. In 1982. And in 1999, AOL bought Time Warner. And it was a brief moment in time where I got that checked off the list. We were the world's biggest media company. And someone approached me to buy the Capitals. And I said, I'm married, I have 2 kids, AOL's growing like crazy, I have to pass. Thank you, though. And when I went home, my wife said, what's new? What you do at work today? I said, oh, this guy, Dick Patrick, approached me and said that I want to buy the Capitals. And she said, what'd you say? I said, nah, it's public scrutiny, it's a lot of money, kids are still too young, AOL takes a lot of time. I took a shower and we're laying in bed, and right before we went to bed, my wife said, what if you get 99 of the 101 things done in your life and you don't buy a team, and if you don't buy a team, you can't win a championship? And next morning I woke up, I said, well, this is why I married you, why I love you, and I bought the team. And again, if it's not written down, if it's not envisioned, not metriced, you miss all these opportunities. If you're just kind of blowing in the wind from day to day, activity to activity, and so having goals and writing them down so they stare at you. I saw this with my health. I said, I want to be healthy, I want to live to be 100. I need to do 20,000 steps a day. I need to drink 64 to 72 ounces of water a day. And for like 3 years, every day, and it became addictive to check it off. And so as young people, make those goals, make those lists, write it down, and it becomes very self-fulfilling. And so I turned a reckoning into, I think, something positive all around a soundbite.
Thank you. Well, since we sort of started talking...
Bobby, look at, Bobby is so cool. His Fitbit matches his outfit.
Glad you noticed.
Very cool.
Thank you. Still going to ask these questions, though. So, we're talking about sports, and I was going to save that for a little bit later, but there's about, I don't know, 300 of us in here, small group. I'm sure nothing will get outside this room. So, is there anything you can tell us, secret trades, secret plays coming up that we promise not to tell anyone? And if not that, is there anything that you'd like to mention about the upcoming season that we'd be interested in? Wizards or Caps?
So the demography of our world has changed dramatically from rural to metro. And 9 years ago was the first time in the globe's history where more people live in cities than live outside of cities. It took a long time, but we're now about major metro areas. And there's a tremendously smart study done by a company called A.T. Kearney that talks about regionalism and the birth of super cities, and that there'll be 10 super cities around the world, and that super cities are more important than countries, and so like London is a super city. It's 250 miles long, it has 3 airports, it has 10 million people. The majority of the people that are moving into the city are 35 years of age or younger. It has all these traits of what a super city is. And in North America, there are 4 super cities. There's Los Angeles, which really is kind of from Orange County all the way down to San Diego. There's Chicagoland. There's Greater New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, obviously Manhattan in New York. And then there's what's being referred to here as the DMV. It goes from Richmond, Virginia to Delaware. And we're a super city. We're Greater Washington. And in metro areas and super cities, very few institutions define that community. It's universities. Universities are the single most important engine that define that community. It's longevity, it's IP, it's alumni, it's research dollars. I mean, you think of the DMV, you think of Washington, D.C., you do. You think of Georgetown, you think of University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, American, I mean, just on and on. And it's iconic real estate. You know, New York had the World Trade Centers. That was like the double pain of 9/11. It wasn't just loss of life. It was this iconic real estate. What did they hit here? The Pentagon. We have the most iconic real estate in the country. I mean, our National Mall has the most iconic space, buildings. Then it's green space, gathering space. We've got them all. New York has Central Park. I mean, on and on. Green space is really important. Then defining business, you know, LA, Hollywood. New York, Wall Street. Chicago used to be meat packing and slaughtering and railroads. Here we have the federal government. Right? I mean, it's hard to differentiate sometimes Washington, D.C., the community from Washington, D.C. And then sports teams. You say Boston, you go, oh, New England, I'm a Patriots fan. Celtics, Bruins, Red Sox, no Red Sox. I mean, you say New York, and you kind of go down the list. And so what I've been amazed at is that in this new world, young, educated people, our area is like the #1 magnet for millennials and now Gen Z. With all of the change in media, the only thing that matters in a media landscape is news and sports and movies. I watched a little bit of the Emmys the other day. It was like, no one watches TV and shows. I didn't know any of the shows. If you look at Variety, over the last 12 months, what are the best rated shows on television? Of the top 100, I think 80 plus, Super Bowl, World Series, Stanley Cup, NBA Finals, it's sports. And then, when there's really, really bad news or the presidential debates. So sports plays now this outsized role in your community and in media. And when I bought the Capitals in 1999 and then the Wizards 7 years ago, it wasn't that robust. And I bought them to win championships and get across off my list. But now they've become big social responsibility. These are unbelievably important assets to the community. Where Capital One Arena might be the most important business building in DC. I'm the DC Chamber of Commerce Man of the Year again this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, but it's because we innovate, we're entrepreneurs, and we bring people into the city. And we're the most activated Uber pickup and drop-off destination. We're this portal where people come in and then they go to restaurants and bars and shopping. We're a magnet for renters. Instead of it being bad, they promote it as, and it's within walking distance of Verizon Center. And we're active where you have a hot building, over 300 events. And then we manage on the campus of George Mason University, the Eagle Bank building. And then we have the Capitol's Iceplex in Virginia. And now we're working with our city to build something I think is very meaningful in Ward 8. And how many people in this room have ever been across the Anacostia River to Ward 8? Fantastic. There's a lot of, as I've gotten older, very few things like tweak me. And a lot of people write and have opinions, but have never been to Ward 8. And it's 5 miles from the Capitol, and it is not a community that's been uplifted. In fact, we announced 2 years ago that we would break ground, we would build this building, and I went out 2 Sundays ago, and the community looked exactly like it was 2 years ago. And 3 miles away, the wharf area, have you seen the wharf area? You have to go see the wharf with these mega buildings going up and condos and shopping. And then the DC United Stadium is going up. And the other side of the Anacostia is unbelievable. It's what our city. I couldn't be happier and more of a cheerleader for how it's growing. But 3 miles away, there's no place to go grocery shopping. If you go to Grubhub, like I did, and try to find someone to deliver you food, it's Maryland fried chicken. It's one of the pizza things, and it's 100 minutes. There's no food trucks. There's no healthy eating. It's graduation rates in high school going to college are in the 40% range. And so we want to use the Wizards practice facility and then a new arena where we're going to put the Washington Mystics, and then we just bought a G League team, a D League team, and we'll put that there. And then I'm hoping to put some of our esports, I own an esports team, Team Liquid, and play some games there, and share there, create jobs, do training, and then use that as a way to, one of my investments is Sweet Green. We want a Sweet Green should be there. And another one, anyone here ever eat at Sweet Green? Kava, has anyone eaten at a Kava? Okay. Bring them out there. Jose Andres, who's this great chef, entrepreneur. Jose, you need to be an entrepreneur. We'll put a little money in. You should have food trucks out there. We need to bring the prosperity and a lot of this there. And then we've committed to $10 million of philanthropy to Ward 8. This morning George is leaving, but George's boss was Don Graham for a long time. Don started a charity called DC CAP, DC College Access, and now I'm chairman of DC College Access, and we're earmarking a bunch of money in wraparound services just for Ward 8. And then there's a charity called Martha's Table, and we're working with them to bring cooking and healthy living techniques and food. So you'll be able to come to the arena and shop, if you will, or get food and learn how to cook it for your family. And we want to use sports and the facility as a way to uplift the community, like MCI Arena, Verizon Center, now Capital One Arena has done down in that area. So all of a sudden, owning the teams has become, we have 4,000 full and part-time employees. We're one of the largest taxpayers, and so the responsibility of it has become much more than, did you know that the Washington Capitals in the last 10 years have the best regular season record in the NHL, but we've never gotten past the second round? You're a great owner, you're the worst owner in sports. And the Wizards, the NBA, and I think it goes a lot to indoor sports versus outdoor sports. And young people, indoor sports right now are ascendant. They're in cities. You go to a football game. Here you go to FedEx Field. Hour drive, traffic, sit outside, the fidelity of the wireless, the cameras, it snows, it rains, it's hot. Indoor sports, you take the metro, you walk, high-speed cameras, air conditioned, integrity of lighting, flat screen TVs that you can see, and so arenas and indoor sports have become these gathering places and activation, and all of a sudden they're not just about winning championships. I won't rest till we win a championship. But you hire people, you pay taxes, you uplift communities. And, frankly, if you win a championship, you bring like a bit of immortality. Nothing rallies a community. This campus, when University of Maryland won its national championship in basketball, insanity. I mean, it was Georgetown University, when we won a national championship, insanity. Patrick Ewing's back being our coach. It's the school trying to recapture and reclaim that. And this will celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Bullets winning the NBA championship this year. And there's still people who, remember that. That's like it's etched in their memory. They were, let's see, Tom is here. Tom, what was your memory, right? It's vivid of when you're on a championship team or you're in that community, it's palpable. And that's what we want to do. Tom, by the way, is I don't want to make him blush, but like the exemplar alumni, educated, smart, public servant, congressman, working now in academia. He was the guy growing up that you hated. It's like your mother would say, why can't you be like Bill Bradley or Tom? Tom played for our team, is active in our alumni, and is a iconic member of the community. Politics, sports, big man on campus and school, and the University of Maryland plays such a big role. How many students now, undergraduate and graduate?
35, I think.
35,000. How many alumni do you think in the DMV? I mean, just think of that as a community. As an entrepreneur, I go, wow, wonder what business and service you could be to get that community activated to do things.
So 2 remaining questions here before we run out of time. One is, Ted is known primarily, very, very well known, obviously, as a sports team owner and as a very successful businessman. But what a lot of folks don't know in the public is how much he does in the community and how he impacts the community and how philanthropic he is. And so I'd like to hear your thoughts a little bit on why you give and what it means to you, and just a little soundbite on that, please.
I mean, it's a privilege and honor to be able to give back, and I think it's incumbent that we do our public service. And as I said when I had my reckoning, I said, leave more than you take. And I was just with someone whose name I won't mention, who is one of the wealthiest people in the world. I mean, the wealth that they've created is, beyond counting. And their plan is to give all of it but 1% away. And that the hardest challenge that they said they had was, it was easy making the money, and it's incredibly difficult in giving it away in a smart, thoughtful, meaningful way to have real impact. And you learn that as you get older, that I used to support 400 different charities, and I'd make this much an impact on them. I was the easiest touch around. And I learned, I'm disappointed, how could I be good at these other things and be such a bad philanthropist, not have any lasting impact? And so over the last 4 or 5 years, I've decided I'm going to do my research, do my homework, find gaps in services or be able to create bigger platforms, and then I'll not just only give my money, but my community, and then I'll do the work. And it's amazing when you do that. So, Don Graham set a great example. So today, in Ward 8, we created a fund that will announce a $15 million scholarship fund just for Ward 8 students. And then we have a STEM program, and we want to take a long-term look, because the goal would be your first generation, I was first generation to go to college, about 95% of the people that live in Ward 8, lots of places in Maryland, are first generation. And it's, let's tag these people and create a college-going culture. And if you're a student, you are among the 1%. You don't blow the opportunity. This is the curve. Graduate from college in 4 years, and you're like this. It doesn't matter what country. If you graduate in 4 years, this is your life career trajectory. And so we want to be able to create a college-going culture, and then we pay for college counselors in every high school in our city. The city pays for guidance counselors. We pay for the college counselors. And then we pay for PSAT and SAT and ACT, and then we help you to get into the college of your choice, and then we give you scholarship and then internships, and the goal is go to a good college, graduate, come back into the community, get a job, pay taxes, fall in love, get married, have children, and we don't have to do the work on the second generation. My kids, there was never any doubt that my son and daughter would go to college. Why? Because I went to college. And it's something that small that we think we can have great impact. So that's one that really matters. And we're now 80% of the scholarship dollars. We also work with, we created DC Tag. Washington, D.C. is a bizarre, one-of-a-kind place. We don't really exist. We have no governor. We have a faux congresswoman. We have no senators. We have no state school. It's the most educated, wealthiest community, one of the fastest growing, and until we pass legislation, and we work it every year, because it has to get renewed every year, kids in Washington, D.C. were disadvantaged. If they applied for University of Maryland or University of Virginia and they could get in, they were out-of-state students. But there was no University of Maryland or University of Virginia in DC. So we literally had to pass a federal law and get funding. So now when a DC student applies to any state school, they're treated and billed like they're an in-state student. They go to Penn State, it's like they're coming from Pennsylvania, and the federal government gifts $10,000 a year, and then we match it. And our goal is to be able to say to any student, we'll give you the tools to get into college, and you have no worries about paying for college, and I didn't visit one single campus on a college tour. And we'll pay for you to take tours, and we'll get you internships, and we want to complete that arc because we know how important education is. And so now my vision of philanthropy is do a few big platform programs where we can put a lot of philanthropy, a lot of money, a lot of energy, and then attract other like-minded. So it's Don Graham and the Gates Foundation and the federal government and Monumental Sports and the Leonsis Foundation, and we can like really make a difference. And we're going to do that in 3 or 4 major categories. And so, but the philanthropy came from my mom and dad who had no money. People think philanthropy is all write checks. My mom was always the person doing bake sales, making like cakes and pies to sell for the PTA. And one of my earliest memories was Jerry Lewis Telethon. They had these cards, and you would collect change from neighbors. It's a little cutout for 50-cent piece, and then quarters and dimes and nickels and pennies. And each card was like $4 when you filled it. And you would basically go to neighbors, and they would give you their change, and you'd stick them in, and then you'd get all of these cards. And if you got the most cards, you got to go to Radio City to go to the Jerry Lewis Telethon. Jerry Lewis just died about a month ago. I hate Jerry Lewis. I got the most cards in my neighborhood, and I was going to the Jerry Lewis Telethon at Radio City. And I remember my dad and I took the subway, and I was all excited. Jerry Lewis, the nutty professor, is really funny. And the car pulled up, and my dad and I were coming, and all these kids went running over. And I ran over, I said, Dad, Jerry Lewis. And I ran over, and the door opened, and he was in a bad mood. And I went, Mr. Lewis, will you sign this? And he looked at my dad and me, and he said, "Scram, kid." And I didn't even know what the word, you know what the word scram means? I think it's like a 60s colloquialism, get out of there. And I saw the pain and defeat in my father's eyes when he said, "Scram, kid." I mean, it still stays with me. But I tell my players this story all the time, that one interaction like that, I used to raise money for March of Dimes, for the Jerry Lewis Telethon Muscular Dystrophy, and Jerry Lewis said, "Scram, kid." I stopped doing that, and I hated the way my father felt and looked. And forever, I've made fun of Jerry Lewis. So, in fact, it got so funny that Jerry Lewis was worshipped as a comedic god in France. In fact, they gave him they knighted him. And one time my wife said, I really want to go to Paris. And I said, absolutely not. They worship Jerry Lewis. So the other day she said, hey, Jerry Lewis died. Should I book the Ritz in Paris? Okay.
Time for one more question. So one final question. Looking out in the crowd, we have a number of entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. And if you could just sort of leave us with, what's your best advice?
The first would be, because you're in a learned academic environment and there's experts here and smart people, is no one knows nothing. It's a great sports thing. No one knows nothing. And it's really, really true that there are no right answers that someone else can give you. And sometimes the biggest things that happen, Sweet Green is going to be like one of the most important companies. We invested early. It's 4 students from Georgetown. And it was like, kale? It used to be like an M Street hamburger, Hamlet, White Castle. They're going to sell kale, farm to table, really? Research, and no one knows nothing. It was passion, execution, hard work, and belief in yourself, not in the experts. So I think that's a really important lesson, that it's good to be extroverted, it's good to poll, it's good to research, it's good to ask people, but for the most part, it's all about you. It's all about how well you envision and you work. And Kevin Plank, who's a good friend of mine, who's one of your most famous alums, the guy worked. I saw Kevin when he was launching his company, and I bet on it. I told them, I said, I get it. And he was hustling. We were the first sports teams, professional sports teams, to use his stuff. And I said, well, just give us some samples. And he was horrified. I can't give you samples. You have to pay for this stuff. And he was charming and funny and determined, and that kind of passion, that kind of extra effort, and he built, one of the most valuable, great companies. And then he started to do other things, and the company had a reckoning. And what's the solution? Kevin's back working like he did when he was an entrepreneur. He's going back to what he knows, and you watch. It might take a year, it might take 2 years, but fish stink from the head down. Organizations take on the personality traits of their leader. Kevin's fixated and will fix it, and that is just drafting everybody along. And I do think that, like determination and hard work, we see it with athletes. We see it. John Wall is a very, very gifted, great basketball player. We just gave him a $176 million extension. Tom, what's the most money you ever made? Yeah. Tom was all-star, 6'11", once blocked one of my shots at a charity basketball game. $300,000. We have 3 players on our team that make $25 million a year or more. John Wall in the last year was still make $42 million. And this summer, he's been on, go to Instagram, he's been on like a fitness workout, hard work tour And now LeBron said, that's my kind of guy. Let's work out together. And let's go bike 100 miles. Let's go box 10 rounds. Let's go, do 1,000 sit-ups. Let's go work and not leave the gym till we take 1,000 jumps. I mean, the work ethic of greatness is unbelievable. Michael Jordan played for our team, was my partner for a while, and when he made the movie Space Jam, it was on the Warner Brothers lot, Hollywood. He's a movie star. He'd won championships. He had them build a half-court basketball court. He had his trainer, and he anticipated, I'm not going to be able to jump out of the building the next part of my career. And back then they didn't have the sophistication we do now on spacing. We have these high-speed cameras that will tell you what your shooting percentage is when someone is 6 inches in front of you, 12 inches in front of you, if you dribble 1 time and shoot 2 times. I mean, the heat map and analytics are unbelievable. His belief was he had to work on how does he get more spacing? If you remember, he developed kind of this jab, step, and back to get space. And it really wasn't a jump shot now, it was more jumping back to get the space. And 10,000 of those shots a week. And his last championship ring, it was the famous Karl Malone, and what was the guy who was defending him? Byron Russell. And he broke the guy down and it's like unbelievable. But it was the 10,000 shots a week, practicing that made that look easy. Last year, in the game of the year, we lost to Cleveland at home. It was the best regular season basketball game I'd ever been to. And LeBron hit a 3-point shot with less than a second left, right in front of me. And it was the greatest play I'd ever seen. We went up 2 points with foul shots, and Kevin Love took the ball from the successful foul shot, took a step behind the basket, and threw a pass over his head. And I'm sitting right near the bench, and I hear, whoosh. I mean, that's how it was moving. And LeBron catches the ball with his left hand. It looked like a grapefruit. And as he catches it, he sees he's not behind the 3-point line. And he catches the ball, and in the same motion takes a step back, throws the ball at the backboard, and falls out of bounds in a second. And it wasn't a heave, a Hail Mary, it was a catch, a step back, and a shot high off the backboard right in. And Bradley Beal, one of our great young players afterwards, said, we have these guys. We can beat these guys. They don't want any part of us, and they only beat us because of a lucky shot. And LeBron took unbelievable umbrage at lucky shot. I've done that shot in practice 1,000 times. It's like LeBron changed. He's the greatest athlete of our generation, greatest basketball player, and he practices falling out of bounds at the buzzer 1,000 times. So, like, hard work with talent, with determination, with that confidence, not arrogance, I think translates very, very well into your business lives.
Thank you so much for being our inaugural speaker. Really appreciate it.